big thing is that I'd love to just put this on hold. I think we have a plan. I think we can work with this the way it is. Everything is here that we want to do. Now, I think it's the big thing is coming up with the money, and I think we should follow through with the river, further this downtown area, that money, and I think we talked about doing it a different way. I think that would work, and get that started with the little money that we have, and get it going. And if we have other money, start reworking our park accordingly, and figuring out what our money is there that we have. Right now, I'm not really for it at all, because I think it's going to cost us too much money right up front, and I'd like to see us work on the downtown area and get our businesses downtown taken care of, and then work our way to, and then do a few things, whatever money's available through the TIF, as far as in the park and everything.
If I could respond, because there's a really misunderstanding. What we're proposing is that the city not upfront any money. That this project will be totally driven by the private sector investment. So it's the private sector that's going to provide those funds to do those improvements we're talking about. The private sector will get reimbursed for certain of those funds that relate to the public benefit side of this thing. The property taxes and maybe sometimes the sales taxes that project, or bed taxes that project generates, will be the revenue source to, in fact, reimburse the private developer for those public amenities that they make. That's negotiated as part of the agreement with the city. And now Mike might want to expand upon it a little bit, but that's the redevelopment will never work, and it was never intended to work as you described. Redeveloped is set up. In fact, my opinion is it was set up even originally when they added 23 years instead of 20. The assumption is you got projects virtually ready to go. It takes 3 years to get them up and running and on the books, producing property tax, and you got 20 years to bond against that. It was encourage upfront private investment that helped facilitate public improvements that you otherwise would have had to pay out of other sources. So it's just the opposite. It's saying this thing is intended to attract private developments to the interest to the point where they're willing to advance funds to do the public amenities as well as the private amenities, and they take the risk in terms of reimbursement from future property tax flow.
In other words, you're saying where let's say the grain elevator is right now, we would allow them to take that property over. Would the city own the property, or would they own the property?
There's all kinds of options. But one of the options I've talked with staff and the mayor about would it be you'd have the ability. It could be all privately owned. It could be a private restaurant operation with the lower level devoted to concessions and restrooms to support the park. And maybe the city retains ownership of that lower level, or simply has an agreement with the restaurant to operate that for public use. And we did that a couple times in Peoria, where the city didn't want to own any more parkland, so they conveyed it to the private, adjacent private owner. He'd agreed to, in fact, maintain it then, but he had to utilize it for public purposes. He had to allow public access and festivals and those kind of things. But so there's a number of options that we'd work through as you really get into details. But it could be totally privately owned, or it could be publicly owned, or it could condominiumized and partially owned by the public.
It's just hard to give up park area once we get it, because we'll never get it back.
And it's how and that's really an important question, because it goes right back to the center of discussion. What are we offering the private developer? Well, we need to work through that question. You as a council, would you rather see it publicly owned or privately owned? If you'd rather see it privately owned, then that's something we have to negotiate with the private developer. If you'd rather see it retained as public, then we need to look at how does the city maintain it, or do you bring the park district in through some kind of relationship? Those are the issues we haven't. We need to approve the plan, and then get into those details as we look at each of those elements. Should that should that boat dock area we're talking about, should that be publicly owned or privately owned? What's our options? You know, same kind of thing.